Is every story Mater tells a lie? Throughout this video, I will look into different aspects of the Cars movies, show, and shorts to find out if Mater is actually telling the truth. And by extension, I will try to find out if the events of Cars 2 actually happened. I will try to find out if Cars 2 is actually canon. The idea of this video came to me when I was watching Cars on the Road when that came out back in September of 2022. And I found myself thinking what always lingers in the back of my mind whenever I watch Cars 3. Did Cars 2 even happen? You see, even though Cars 2 is 1 hour and 46 minutes filled with things happening all over the place, none of it is ever really mentioned or referred to again in later installments, not in Cars 3 or in Cars on the Road. It is at this point I should probably mention that this is not the first video on YouTube on this exact topic. When I first got the idea, I had to check YouTube to see if anyone else, specifically Ned Wheeler, the OG of Cars videos, had made a video on the topic. Ned hadn't, but Fat Duck 420 released their video about a year before I released mine, which means that their video came out before Cars on the Road, kind of making the video outdated. No disrespect to Fat Duck 420 of course, they walked so I could run with this video, and there's bound to be a fair bit of overlap between our videos. And while I'm on the topic of other videos, the Unlucky Tug video on Cars on the Road happened to come out the day before I'm recording the voiceover for this video. So if you want a video that goes a bit more in depth on the show, I'd recommend that one, as I will try to stay mostly, but not completely spoiler-free of the show. Okay. On to the topic at hand. Why do I think that Mater might be lying about the events of Cars 2? Before I start to look into that, I reckon most of you who have clicked this video are familiar with the events of Cars 2, but if you are not, here's a quick rundown of the events of the movie. Lightning McQueen has since the first movie now won 4 Piston Cups and is done for the season. The Piston Cup has now been dedicated and renamed after Doc Hudson, who passed away between movies. When coming back to Radiator Springs, Mater has all kinds of things planned for him and McQueen to do together, as Mater hasn't been allowed to come to any of McQueen's races. All Mater wants is to hang out with his friend. While watching TV in the Wheelwell Motel, we are introduced to Sir Miles Axelrod. He is the bad guy, who, after having traveled the world, has invented a renewable, clean-burning fuel, sold his oil company, and put together a new racing competition where this new fuel, Allinol, is to be used by all contestants. McQueen ends up entering the competition and together with a group of Radiator Springs residents, Mater included, go traveling the world, racing in the World Grand Prix. But that's just half the movie. The other half is, Mater gets mistaken for an American spy by the British intelligence and has to help the British spy to uncover what the Lemon Cars are up to with their cameras that have been converted into weapons that they are bringing into the World Grand Prix to ruin the races. It turns out that while Axelrod was traveling the world, he came upon a huge oil field, and because the world was trying to find something to replace fossil fuels, he decided to take matters into his own hands, wheels, to create Allinol, have the world's best racers use it in a competition and then blow them up with the modified cameras to prove nothing is as good old-fashioned fossil fuel. He's found out to not have converted to electric, Mater saves the day, the Queen and McQueen, and he's knighted Sir Tow Mater. The Radiator Springs Grand Prix is born and the movie is over. It's not the best Pixar movie, nor is it my favorite, but it happened, it came out. But how much of this is mentioned in the installments of the Cars franchise that came out after Cars 2? That's right, none of it. Not the knighting, not the spies, not the World Grand Prix, not how Mater uncovered a huge conspiracy by Big Oil. Nothing. The only mention in any way, shape or form of Cars 2 that I can find is that there's one car from Cars 2 makes an appearance in Cars 3, Jeff Gorvette, and a picture of Sir Miles Axelrod in Sterling's office in Cars 3. Now, I didn't see this, I only found out about it when looking up at Axelrod on the Cars wiki, where it says it's him in the picture. I wouldn't have been able to spot it myself, but I'll choose to believe the wiki on this one. Does this picture mean that everything in Cars 2 actually happened? Not necessarily. All it really means is that Miles Axelrod and Jeff Gorvette are real characters that exist in the universe. That's it. And when it comes to Jeff Gorvette, depending on which version of Cars 2 you're watching, he may or may not be introduced at all. Because this is a cameo character for Jeff Gordon, a real race car driver who voices Gorvette, and other drivers who voice other versions of this character in other languages. That being said, Jeff is still the one actually racing in the movie, so he's still canon in both movies. Another weird thing that Cars 2 and Cars 3 have in common is that the racing museum in Radiator Springs is in Doc's old clinic. I always found that a bit weird. I mean, it makes sense to honor Doc and his time as a racer in the building he lived and worked his last days in, but they already put the museum where the old motel used to be at the end of Cars. They went through all the trouble of moving it to a new building between Cars and Cars 2, and that stays the same in Cars 3 too, so that's something. Okay, so there are no mentions of Cars 2 in Cars 3 or Cars on the Road except those two characters in the museum. What does that mean? Mater might just be a liar? A lot of it comes down to the end of the movie and how it's set up like a Cars 2 Mater's Tall Tales episode, where Mater tells a tall tale, which the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines as a story that is very difficult to believe, a greatly exaggerated story. Mater will go on about how he's been a firefighter, a wrestler, a flying car, an astronaut and the like. McQueen, who's being told these stories, doesn't believe him, in which Mater replies with something like, "You were there too," making it even less believable, for the episode then to be wrapped up with some sort of proof that the story actually happened. Like a wrestling fan or a space shuttle who comes to pick Mater up for a new mission. This is just how Cars 2 ends too. Mater tells a story on how he saved everyone from Axelrod's plan. He even makes sure to include McQueen and the rest of the Radiator Springs gang as helpers towards the end. We can even see McQueen shake his head like he's saying, "Listen to this, it's all made up." Then someone, who just so happens to be Van from the first Cars, who for some reason is back in Radiator Springs, which is weird enough by itself, questions the truthfulness of the story. And wouldn't you know it, someone swoops down from the sky to prove the story to be true. Both Finn McMissile and Holly Shiftwell make an appearance at the end to prove that the adventures actually happened, and also to prove Mater's statement to Guido that he actually has a girlfriend. This is also where we see Holly's dent, that she doesn't want fixed because it means too much for her. Which brings me over to the other big reason as to why Cars 2 might not be canon. The dent. Okay, hear me out here. This might be a bit of a stretch, but if you actually think about it, it makes a lot of sense. This is my red string on the wall moment. In Cars 2, Mater doesn't want to fix his dents so that the camouflage can work better, because they mean too much for him. He's sentimental towards the dents. Mater gets a new dent when hanging out with McQueen the first day he's back in Radiator Springs. He says,
"Boy, this was the best day ever. And my favorite souvenir, this new dent."
This is the dent right here. We know this because he has it here and for the rest of the movie, but he does not when towing Otis, or in Cars for that matter. This is also the dent the movie focuses on when they try to fix the camouflage. If we check out one of the scenes Mater is in Cars 3, we can see that this dent does not appear to be on his body. It even seems like they've tried to be clever with it, because they show Mater almost exclusively from his right side throughout Cars 3. Hiding the spot the dent is supposed to be. This usually wouldn't be anything to write home about, but since they make such a big point of it in Cars 2, it definitely deserves to be mentioned. Because if Cars 2 happened, Mater would definitely still have that dent in Cars 3. Anything else would be incredibly out of character, even more so than making Buzz a complete moron in Toy Story 4. Does this mean anything? Maybe, maybe not, it's hard to say. Maybe they just forgot to include a dent in the Mater model for Cars 3 and Cars on the Road. Or maybe there is something here, and this is one of those subtle hints Pixar has given us to prove that Cars 2 never actually happened. I won't go too much into Cars on the Road. You can probably find countless other videos about it elsewhere, and it's not what this video is about, but certain things have to be mentioned. Like how in the Salt Flats episode, Mater wants to go fast, faster than McQueen, so it gets streamlined and built to go fast. They never mention the fact that Mater got to keep the rockets from Cars 2, which had him zoom past both Francesco and McQueen at the end of the movie. With that, he might be faster, or at least as fast as McQueen, as we see McQueen keeping up in Cars 2 during the race. And then there's the big one, episode 9 of Cars on the Road, Getting Hitched. We don't only meet Mater's sister Mato, whom he always is bickering with about who is better, while the obvious answer is the guy who saved the Queen and untangled a huge conspiracy by Big Oil. Aside from meeting Mato in this episode, we also learn that Mater comes from money. Just look at that mansion. That's like a Bruce Wayne level mansion, which means Mater might be rich. So how can Mater prove that all his tales are true? Well, he can pay off actors, of course. Not only does it help to close the gap between thinking the tale is untrue to potentially knowing it is, but it also answers the question as to why the proof just suddenly appears when someone doesn't believe the story. Of course, I can't rely too much on this because we don't actually know if Mater is rich or not, so this, while it does add up, at least in my head, it's just a theory. A film! And when it comes to proving the stories, I find it fascinating that the only tall tale that doesn't get any significant proof is the one that actually could be disproven pretty quickly. And that is Tokyo Mater, where Mater goes to Japan and becomes Drift King. Some people would certainly recognize him when they go to Tokyo in Cars 2. So instead of offering any proof, Pixar decided to just have Guido modify Mater and leave it at that. No proof given. This tale is certainly a false one. Probably. The thing is though, is the whole movie non-canon? Is part of it canon and another part non-canon? Is it all canon? What about the shorts? Are they all canon or part real and part not? As in Mater telling the story is canon, but the story itself is not. Because we do see McQueen with the paint job that references to Cars 2 in some of the Tall Tales. So I would think that parts of the story in both the Tall Tales shorts and Cars 2 itself are actually canon. But then comes the question, which parts of Cars 2 are canon then? It's hard to say, mostly because it's never mentioned again. Like, did the World Grand Prix happen? Was Axelrod behind it? Was he actually evil? Hard to say. We know from the picture on the wiki that Axelrod exists, and we know from Cars 3 that McQueen and Jeff Gorvette know each other, but that's about it. Aside from the museum and the fact that McQueen got fitted with actual headlights in Cars 2 to replace the stickers he had before, and has real headlights in Cars 3. And about whether or not the World Grand Prix happened or not is the biggest and hardest question to answer in my opinion, because that's never mentioned again either. But if it never happened in the first place, nothing after the Wheelwell Motel scene would have happened in the entire movie. Or if the championship did happen but the Lemons weren't there at all, what would have happened to make all the cars come to Radiator Springs to race in the Radiator Springs Grand Prix at the end of the movie? This is why it's hard to figure out if parts of the movie are canon but other parts not. Maybe the races happened, but Mater actually did go home when he was supposed to, and came up with the whole story to make himself feel better about screwing up for McQueen in the first race. It's hard to say, but it's a possibility, though it still doesn't explain the Radiator Springs Grand Prix, though that could easily be explained by saying McQueen just invited his racing buddies from the World Grand Prix to come and race with him in a new championship. It's not a solid argument at all, but it kinda makes sense at least. But what about the Piston Cup? We're told in Cars 2 that the Piston Cup has been renamed the Hudson Hornet Piston Cup. Heck, they even changed the design of the cup. And again, this is never brought up again. In Cars 3, it's just a piston cup again. No dock to be seen. Is it possible that they only changed the title and design of the cup for one season? Maybe. But then I feel like it should have been mentioned in the section about Doc in the museum bit at the Rusty's Racing Center in Cars 3. It says he won 3 cups, and that's it. Not that it was named after him for a season or anything. It's all just a bit weird. Also, would the cup even be dedicated to a racer who won it 3 times? Would they rename it to the King's Piston Cup when he dies? Because as far as I know, he won 4 of them. And what about McQueen? He has won 7 as far as we know from Cars 3. To be fair, Doc holds the record for most wins in one season, so that's something at least. But I still find it a bit weird to rename the entire cup after one racer, especially when we haven't heard anything of it before or after. But then again, I don't follow racing. Maybe this is the kind of thing they do in real life too. The Unlucky Tugs video taught me that apparently there were supposed to be characters from Planes in Cars on the Road, but that was seemingly ultimately scrapped. It would make sense to see some Planes character appear in something Cars related, because as we all know, Planes takes place in the world of Cars, and Mater actually goes to Prop Wash Junction in the Tall Tales short Air Mater. Here Mater meets Skipper and Sparky from the Planes movie, and Skipper teaches Mater to fly. This begs the question, is Planes canon in the Cars universe? The Skipper we see in Air Mater is a very different Skipper from the one we meet in Planes, so it definitely doesn't take place before the first Planes movie, though I guess it could take place during or after Planes Fire and Rescue, because while Dusty Crophopper is away doing his firefighter work, Skipper has time to teach other vehicles to fly. So maybe it's canon. We can see Sarge in a picture in Planes Fire and Rescue after all. Cars 2 just doesn't progress the story at all. They're all in the exact same spot at the end as they were at the start, except Mater is knighted now. Speaking of the knighting, after being knighted, they changed the sign outside the town to include Mater. This sign is never seen again in the franchise. Coincidence? Yeah, maybe. Cars 2 is also the only Cars movie where characters die. Sure, Doc dies between movies, but Finn McMissile straight up kills several other cars, especially on that oil rig. The good guys killing more cars than the bad guys, whom as far as I remember only kills 1 car, maybe 2 throughout the entire movie. Could this be canon? So, all in all, is Cars 2 canon, or is everything Mater says just a big lie? The truth is that it's hard to say. Without someone who worked on writing and or directing the movies, TV show and or shorts to tell us directly, it's all really just speculation. A lot of the evidence leaned toward the movie not being canon, by the events of the movie never being brought up again. Mater's dent having disappeared, Finn and Holly being fine with Mater blowing their cover to everyone listening to the story, and Mater potentially being well enough off to be able to pay off a lot of actors to help him fool his friends to believe his tall tales. But the thing is, there's probably more to this than just the on-screen media. It's probably just like with Star Wars and Bionicle, lots and lots of canonical written media too. Like the Adventures of Tow Mater comics that I learned of from Tug's video that explores more than the movies do, and that potentially can answer the question, was Cars 2 maybe just Cars 2 all along? Editing me here, when I was going back to Fat Duck 420's video to grab the link to put in the description, I happened to scroll down to the comments, where I can see that they have also noticed a lack of dent, but also that there's a monster truck wrestling poster in the Thunder Hollow bar. Is this tall tale true? Huh, maybe, considering the fan didn't want McQueen's autograph, which could mean he wasn't there when it actually happened, and maybe Mater just had a bit of a wrestling career. In the credits of Cars 3, there is something that looks like the number 2 in a crosshair. Could this be a reference to Cars 2 and the crosshair on the cameras? Also, there is the Hudson Hornet Piston Cup logo there too. Maybe it's Canon after all. Planes is potentially Canon. Anything is possible at this point.